Hello, empowered leaders. I'm Shweta Mogha, and this is Empowered Women of the World podcast. Leaders across 35 countries listen to this podcast every week to get tips on leadership, technology, entrepreneurship, and mindfulness. Stay with me till the end of this podcast when I will share with you a tip or resource that you can use to be successful. Before we start today's podcast, I want to remind you about the eWOW virtual program. The eWOW Virtual Incubator Program, for which we are now accepting applications, is a 4-week virtual program which will help you take your startup idea to the pitch deck stage. The link is in the show notes. And today, I'm excited to welcome Jossie Haines on the show. Jossie is the Senior Director of Platform Engineering at Tile. And over the last 20 years of her career, she has focused on large-scale consumer tech projects. She has worked on Siri at Apple, led development of various Zynga games. And today, Jossie would talk about networking and how do we leverage it to find mentors. Hi, Jossie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Shweta. It's so nice to be here today talking to you.
Awesome, Jossie. Jossie, your passion for technology started early in life, and you led platform engineering for Tile. Please share with our audience, how did you gain interest in tech?
So my passion for technology actually started when I was 5 years old and I got my first computer, a Commodore 64. Now this was 1985, so there was no internet, and my brother really encouraged my passion for computer science and technology as I was growing up. When I went to go get my undergrad degree, my parents really wanted me to be a doctor, so I went and got a chemistry degree. Around my junior year, I realized I had no interest in going to grad school. And so I was like, oh, I better get a job after college or I'm gonna have some upset parents. So I got a job as a technical consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers. And again, this was 99 when I graduated, so there weren't like online classes. So the PricewaterhouseCoopers sent all of its management consultants to Florida for a 3-month boot camp to learn to code. And I picked it up really quickly and really loved it. And so they sent me actually to California to a week-long training on a technology called Broad Vision, which doesn't exist anymore. And I pretty much fell in love with the Bay Area. The climate, the culture, this was the middle of the dot-com boom, so technology was just taking off. And I said, this is where I want to be, and this is the career I want to have. And so I got a job as a web developer at a now defunct dot-com startup and started my career here in January of 2000, knowing one person in the Bay Area. And I've pretty much been here for the last 20 years since, working in technology.
Wow, it's so amazing. And sometimes we don't realize that relocation, moving into a new area, completely forces you to build your own ecosystem. And that leads me to my next question, why is networking so important? And especially during these COVID times, I'd love to hear your views on that.
I feel networking is so important. And it's one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to women who talk to me wanting to go into the computer science field. And the reason is we can't, computer science is a collaborative project, right? You don't build large-scale infrastructures on your own.
Yeah.
And to get to the next level of your job, you need to network with people as well. And so the big thing I tell people is make sure you're creating a diverse network. It is very important to have, for a woman, to have other women in your network to collaborate with, understand some of the challenges we face as women in tech, especially right now during COVID-19. With everybody being at home, it's actually being seen that, women are having to still do more of the housework and stuff, right? So it's important to network and understand, what are some of these challenges we're all facing right now. I have a big fear that COVID-19 is going to have a negative effect on diversity in tech. And so I think it's super important, even more now, that we're networking, sharing what our struggles are, being willing to speak up and say, hey, like, I'm struggling right now. But back along the lines of the diverse networks, I think it's so important to also get men in your network as well. And the reason is they're the ones in the majority of power. Women only have 25% of the leadership roles in the tech industry. And so if you don't have men in your network, you're not going to get opportunities that they have that the women might not be exposed to.
Absolutely. And, very rightly said. I think your network needs to be diverse. And of course, having your male allies supporting you is equally important. And as I'm thinking, and reflecting, when I moved in to US from India, I really struggled to build my own network because I did not know too much, too many people around. What would be your recommendation, suggestions in terms of how do you start networking? Because that's something which most of us actually struggle with. How do you build your network?
So there's so many communities online and in person, but of course right now we're all at home. And the great thing is a lot of the in-person communities are also moving online, which I think is giving people the power to actually network with even more people right now. So I actually think it's kind of a very interesting opportunity because everyone's moving all of their networking events online. And so you could join into a networking event in Canada, for example. Like I did that the other day because I have, team members in Vancouver, but I don't usually get to go participate in those events. And so, go find, there's so many women in tech communities that are great. Alpha is wonderful, Women Who Code, and, Lesbians Who Tech. There's and then if you're, for non-women, if you're Latino, there's Techeria, which is very active. Shift is very active for veterans. So there's so many online resources and communities. And so find the communities that you're associated with and reach out to other people. And then lastly, one of the things I tell people about networking is don't be afraid to reach out on LinkedIn to managers who have roles you may want in the future. And what I tell people is don't say, oh, hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you have a job for me? Because that's not going to get you a response. But if somebody sends an email to me on LinkedIn and says, hey, Jossie, I see where you are in your career, and I'd love to, be an engineering leader someday, and I'd love to kind of pick your brain for, 10 minutes to kind of help me. I will answer every single one of those reach outs to me. And I know a lot of leaders will. So it's really about how, you're reaching out to ask for networking as well.
Absolutely. And Jossie, can't, agree more than this, because I do see that a lot of people reach out and immediately want to ask for job opportunities. And networking and building relationship is a two-way process wherein you have to give first to be able to get something, or just seek advice and build that partnership and relationship, and let it grow over a period of time before you actually start looking for job opportunities.
Absolutely.
And, I know that, mentors have played a great role in your career, but I'd love to hear from you, how did they support and mentor you to find your niche as such? And how did you go about identifying and leveraging your mentors as such?
Yeah, so I've definitely had many mentors over the course of my life and my career. I would say my first mentor is actually my mom. She was she got divorced young and was going to grad school and raising her two kids, and eventually was teaching master's classes while raising her kids before she married my dad. And so she really raised me with this independent resilience attitude that, you can't rely on, like, you need to be self-sufficient, yes, others can help you, but you need to rely on yourself. And I think that really shaped the person I am today. And I think that's really what pushed me to, move out to California knowing only one person. I don't think a lot of people would do that, right? And so I really call her my first mentor. And then throughout my career, I've definitely had a lot of mentors. And so the one I'm going to actually mention today is Steve, who's actually my boss today. I've worked for Steve. I've known Steve for 15 years. I first met him at NetApp. This is the 4th time he's been my boss. And we've worked together at 3 different companies. And he's always been great at supporting me, really pushing me to get to the next level. And, when I was struggling at Apple, he was the one I called up on the phone, like crying and saying, I don't know what I'm doing right now. And I was able to talk through it and really feel better at the end of it. And so that's what, your mentors and sponsors are really there for. Someone you can really be vulnerable with and admit, hey, things aren't going well, and ask for support and advice.
Yes. And, sometimes we don't realize that your own family members and people closer to you could be your mentors as well. Whenever we think about mentorship, we think about only mentoring for your professional reasons and finding somebody externally. But as you said, your first mentor was actually your mom, who gave you a lot of support in terms of identifying your own niche and pushing you to those limits of moving to California. That's where your career started flourishing. And then, of course, your own manager, with whom you have consistently maintained the relationship over the years and remained in touch, so that you could lean on him or her to be able to get advice as and when you need.
Yes, definitely.
And this brings me, to an aspect which I always wonder, what are those some core elements that make a mentor-mentee relationship a success?
So trust, I think, is the biggest one. And it starts with trust, right? Every relationship, whether it's mentor, mentee, coworkers, I think every relationship really starts with trust. And so it's about building that trust. And I think a big part of that is being willing to be vulnerable on both sides. And also, I think it's really successful when the mentor also takes this as a learning relationship as well. Every time I meet with a mentee, I'm always open to learning new things from them, and because they also have a different perspective. So that's something I also tell mentors to do is, for this to be successful, like, you should be learning as well too. And then the other thing I tell mentees is, the mentee-mentor relationship is for you to drive, right? And, your mentor is going to have advice for you and suggestions for you, but, really take advantage of those, 30 minutes or an hour when you're going to meet, and, come prepared with questions and like the things you want to talk about, because it's not up to your mentor to kind of like just guide your career path, right? They're there to help you along the way, but you really need to be putting the effort.
Absolutely, Jossie. And these are very, very valuable insights that you're sharing with our audience today. That in a mentor-mentee relationship, the onus is on mentee essentially to drive that relationship and come prepared in terms of what they want to discuss with their mentors, and how do they leverage their mentors to be able to take them through difficult times or even good times when things are going well for you. And another important aspect that you touched upon was mentors need to also be open to learning, because it is a two-way process. With every individual, you learn something new that adds to your own experience as well. And most importantly, that you touched upon, while you have a mentor, you are also mentoring a lot of young people who are coming in the tech space. So be ready to give back to the society and become a mentor, when the right time comes in. So wonderful insights, Jossie.
Yes, thank you. And I actually can't enforce your last comment enough. And a lot of people think they have to be really senior to mentor somebody. But honestly, even if you have just a couple years of experience, you could be a big help to somebody who's trying to get into the field, because we all know getting into computer science isn't easy always.
Absolutely. And there are so many young people today who have actually started their own entrepreneurship ventures, or their own startups. And we look forward to them as being our mentors, because they have explored, done something which we wouldn't have done otherwise. So there is no right tenure to become a mentor. If you have the expertise, if what to bring onto the table, go ahead and support other people who are struggling in that sense as well.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you, Jossie. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show today, and thank you for sharing your valuable insights. Thank you so much, Jossie.
It was wonderful being here. Thank you.
And today's resource for you is the link to the eWOW Incubator Program. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you found valuable nuggets in today's podcast. I would love your feedback and thoughts, so please email us at empoweredwow@gmail.com. I look forward to seeing you again in our next podcast. Till that time, keep empowering the world.